Hello, everybody. Good evening to you. And am I audible? If you could just use your feedback with a thumbs up or something, just to make sure that you can hear me. Somebody show me a thumbs up. Excellent. Thank you very much. And good evening to one and all. My name is Dr. Rajiv Thomas, also known as Coach Rajiv. And I am very pleased to introduce to you one of the most excellent doctors here available in India, in the southern part of India, who has a great deal of experience in dealing with children who have various challenges, and of course with adults also. And you must be attending this program maybe because you yourself are a parent or a teacher or a well-wisher of a child with issues who may be having problems related to gadget addiction or adolescent issues or exam fears, inattention, aggression, whatever it may be. I myself am a parent of teenagers and children who are above the age of 15. Something that we always realize is that suddenly the children who used to be so sweet and so wonderful and who used to listen to everything that we say and obey everything that we say suddenly turned rebels. So we tend to wonder, where did these children suddenly disappear? And what has actually happened to them? And to make matters worse, we were badly affected by the COVID situation recently over the last few years, which has not only played with our minds and our brains and made us all go helter-skelter looking for solutions. Imagine the condition of the children who have been faced with exactly the same situation. And in many cases, they are even unable to go and ask somebody for support, simply because of the lack of communication within the families or within their networks or whatever it may be. So without much delay and without taking it too far from my side, I would like to bring on board Dr. Janani, who will be talking to us about a lot of these issues and also touch upon some of the solutions. And then the most interesting part, which would be your Q&As, where you could actually speak to her and ask specific questions that you may actually have. So what I would request of you, just to make sure that we don't interrupt the program and the flow of the program, is that you drop your questions into the chat box. Okay, it could either make it a general chat so that everybody can see the question, and or alternately, you could address it directly to me or to Dr. Janani, and we'll pick up the questions right at the end. And then we will also have an open Q&A where you could come on screen and then ask your questions yourself and take away the answers that you have that will come from Dr. Janani. So thank you very much for joining, and let's go in right to the session. Dr. Janani, if may I request you to unmute and take over.
Hi, good evening. Really nice to see all of you. Thank you, Dr. Rajiv, for that very crisp and beautiful introduction to what they call as yet another pandemic apart from the COVID pandemic, which is the mental health pandemic. So I'm glad some of you have joined today evening, and I'm hoping this would be a good takeaway for all of us here. So without further ado, I would start. Right, I hope my slides are visible. So the topic today would be, what are some of the mental health challenges that are faced by children and teen, especially in the COVID-19, surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So, if you look at how the mental health, what sort of mental health problems have arisen because of COVID in general, you will find that the COVID-19 itself has caused a lot of issues. So we know the physical aspect of how the virus has played havoc with all of us. And apart from that, it has led to a lot of economic and financial issues globally, isn't it? So it has come as a very sudden sort of something that we were not prepared for at all. So there was complete lack of knowledge about how to deal with infectious diseases. And all of a sudden, here is this really, really contagious communicable disease, which is airborne. And we're fighting an enemy that we cannot see. So it makes it all the more difficult for us. We don't know who is harboring the virus, who's a carrier, who's not, who's going to present the symptoms. So there's so much of uncertainty when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic. So when you looked at 2019, there was the sudden surge of cases, which left all of us at loss as to how to protect ourselves and mainly how to protect our families. So there was a lack of preparation, and even in terms of the mental health. So people realized much later that it was not just the COVID-19 pandemic which was affecting us, but it was actually the mental health issues which followed, which were even more important, because there was so much that was happening, wasn't it? There were people who were quarantined, there were people who were hospitalized, there was so much of grief that was happening. Children were separated from their caregivers, parents were kept separately, people in different parts of the world could not travel to meet families, and so on and so forth. So there was a surge of mental health issues that came into light in people who did not have anything prior to this, the illness itself causing its mental health issues. So as a repercussion of the illness, you had certain mental health issues. As a repercussion of, like I mentioned, the financial and the economic problems, you had certain issues. So it was very varied, right? The quarantine, the impact of the media, the fear and anxiety, the lack of socialization, the lack of the ability for us to get out and meet people, this itself created its own set of issues. So like I said, today's talk is going to revolve around how this has actually affected the youngsters very badly, the children, right? The vulnerable population, which are the children and the adolescent group. So if you look at what UNICEF says, they say that 1 in 2 children actually said that they felt less motivated to do any activities that they normally enjoyed. So that in psychological terms is what we call as anhedonia. So there's no interest, there's no motivation, they feel very lethargic, they feel very tired. The usual children who are full of energy, and I'm sure almost all the parents and teachers and caregivers who are sitting here would agree with me that children are generally full of energy, and sometimes we wonder how they are able to go through the entire day, and yet in the night they don't want to fall asleep, isn't it? Because they're so full of energy. And here are these children who started complaining, saying, I'm not feeling like I want to do this, I don't feel like I want to do that, which is really, really surprising, considering children are always interested in trying new things. They're curious beings, isn't it? We're all once past that stage. 43% of young women actually felt very pessimistic about the future as compared to men. But however, this is a very generalized sort of picture. I know personally of a lot of men and women who went through, young men and women who went through a lot of pessimism, who went through a lot of negativity, right? So I would say it's almost half and half. And like it's clearly mentioned here, anxiety, the rates of anxiety in children as young as 3 and 4, where they couldn't even vocalize what anxiety is, they started feeling anxious. And as the age goes up, when the child is actually able to understand that they're feeling really anxious, there was a lot of anxiety coming in. So when I use the term anxiety, what am I referring to? I'm referring to the fact that the child feels frightened, they're fearful, because like I said, we are fighting an enemy whom we cannot see. So we don't know. There's uncertainty, there's unpredictability. You can't even predict what is going to happen, the next minute, the next hour. Anything can happen at any point in time. So there's this sense of hopelessness that sets in. There's a sense of panic that sets in. You feel like you're having palpitations, you feel like you can't breathe, you feel like you're feeling choked. So there's so much of anxiety that's going on, which is there in both children, adolescents, of course, as well as the adults. And the adults' anxiety tends to get passed on to the children and the family as well. And there is a surge of depression also. Depression is an illness, and not depression is just feeling low or a mood, right? And they found studies show that children tend to sort of lean towards their peers and their families when it comes to seeking emotional support. That's very true, isn't it? We're all social beings. We're people who like to seek support from our families, from our friends, when it comes to any sort of issue that is troubling us. So when it comes to children, automatically their tendency is to lean on to the parents or to the family or to the friends for support, isn't it? Right. Now, if you look at COVID-19 impacts on children and adolescents, so in this picture, actually, they're talking about the possible long-term consequences of what COVID can actually do to children, because children are at a very vulnerable stage in life. We need to understand that the age of, when you're a child and then when you move on to adolescence, your brain is still growing. So there are a lot of neuronal connections that are still happening in the brain. The brain isn't completely formed as yet, unlike in an adult. So they're extremely vulnerable to any sort of external stressors that happen. So they can be vulnerable to external stressors in the form of a psychosocial stressor, in the form of infections, which can actually release a lot of, pro-inflammatory cytokines. So basically, these are, things that are released in our body, which tend to fight against anything that comes in as a foreign body, right? And so when there is a release of such pro-inflammatory cytokines that are happening within our body and within our brain, this leads to a lot of changes in our brain. And so, like I said, children and adolescents, the young adults, are extremely vulnerable because their brain is still underdeveloped. And this could lead to a long-term, which is what studies are now looking into. What are the possible long-term consequences of the mental health pandemic that has occurred as a result of COVID-19? Secondary to the illness itself and secondary to the other facets of how COVID-19 has affected all of us. So if you look at the behavioral and the immediate social consequences, definitely there's depression, anxiety, hopelessness, distress. Of course, there is insomnia. I think there is a surge in the case of insomnia, appetite issues. There's a lot of trauma, there's abuse, there's child neglect that's happening. There's an increase in domestic violence because everybody is cooped inside. You have parents and grandparents and, sort of joint family setup, which still happens in the third world countries, which has again led to a lot of other issues. There's a lot of interpersonal and intrapersonal issues that we need to look at. There's deprivation, there's neglect. And like I said, studies are looking into what the long-term consequences are, which could be substance abuse, obesity, lack of emotional progress, psychiatric disorders. There's a surge in the suicidal ideations. Helplines in suicide have been ringing off the hook all through COVID, and many of the callers have turned out to be adolescents and young children who are reaching out to help because they're not able to seek help from anybody around them. So it's a very scary thought, because I think we're still fighting this, isn't it? We started in 2019 and here we are in 2022, fresh into this year, and now we're fighting this Omicron, and we're looking, at least in India, we're looking at a possible lockdown again, and we don't know how things are progressing. So we are constantly fighting this unknown, or rather unseen virus, isn't it? So like I was explaining to you, if you look at the teenage brain, right, this part of your brain is called your prefrontal cortex. So this is your cortex, and this part of your brain, why I'm highlighting this part of your brain is because this part of the brain is the part which tends to develop over time. So it goes on till the mid-20s. And this is the part of your brain that is what is required when it comes to planning, when it comes to motivation, when it comes to organization, cognition, memory, whatever you think of. This is actually the decision maker. So the CEO of the brain is actually the prefrontal cortex. And there are studies that are showing that because in the teens' brains, this isn't completely developed, and like I mentioned before, they're very vulnerable, this leads to a lot of other consequences, right? And this part of your brain, right, which is your medial portion, meaning if I were to cut my skull into half and turn my brain and show it to you like this part would be this portion, and this is called the limbic system. So again, why I'm mentioning all these medical terminologies to you is because the limbic system is again another extremely important part of the brain, which is supposed to be the part which is for all our emotions, our memory, our behavior. It's very interconnected, right? Your prefrontal cortex and your limbic system. So these two areas are absolutely important for any sort of growth that happens. So these two areas are, again, studies are showing that they are getting affected by a gamut of stuff that's happening now. So what are some of the challenges, the mental health challenges that the pandemic has led to? I briefly touched upon them. I'm again, I've written it down for you on the slide so that you get an idea of the plethora of psychiatric syndromes that we're now looking at. I may have missed out some of them because the list is really long. I will quickly run through all this so that you have like a bird's eye view of how COVID has actually affected us, apart from just this being a respiratory issue, right? So the main issue that most parents have come to me recently is with gadget addiction in kids as young as 3 and 4, right up to your teens. Of course, adults are battling this in their own ways. There's depression, anxiety, suicidal ideations. SIB is basically self-injurious behavior. There's a lot of loneliness that has come up now. Lots of people calling and coming and saying, I'm feeling really lonely, right? Which is, again, something that we all can sort of understand as to why they would be feeling this. FOMO, which is the fear of missing out, which comes in from constantly being on social media. So children are afraid of missing out on something important. So they're constantly checking the social media pages to check for updates, or they're constantly posting updates, which in itself has become an addiction, right? And apart from this, of course, you have your cyberbullying, you have your eating disorders, which have really come into play now. Children who have probably had eating disorders in the past, the prevalence of it has really gone up. The intensity of it has gone up. Children who have not had it before have started developing it now. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. See, in this illness, with the COVID-19, we've been taught to sanitize everything. We've been taught to sanitize our hands, to sanitize our houses, to sanitize anything and everything that we touch. So this in itself builds a behavior of constant washing and checking and making sure things are clean. Now, when this itself turns into an obsession, then you land yourself into OCD. So all these illnesses that I'm talking about here, either there is an increase in the intensity of this in children and adolescents who've already been battling this before the COVID-19, as well as children who have now got it as a result of the COVID-19. There's intense social anxiety. We aren't socializing physically, isn't it? It's only now that we've started moving out again. So for a good, I would say 8 to 9 months, we've all been cooped inside. I think in some cases, people have been cooped inside for much longer. So people have not been moving out. There is only, this virtual sort of meets that we have on all these various platforms. So there is a lot of anxiety when it comes to actually seeing somebody, actually when you talk to somebody in person, because children, especially young children, have actually forgotten, or they have not been exposed to how it is to be able to socialize with somebody apart from family. So children who were born through the COVID period, children who were really young, who are now slowly growing up, imagine they've been in the four walls, repeatedly being exposed to only the little family that they have. In half the cases, it's a nuclear family. So just the parents, or maybe one other caregiver apart from the parents. So the developing brain, which needs to have made so many neuronal connections, which comes as a result of socializing, has not happened in these children. So either these children are anxious, or they just don't know how to socialize. There's a lot of aggression, especially in the teens. I get calls from parents saying that the children have become really aggressive, they're throwing things, there's temper tantrums. It's like they've gone to a place where they're not reachable, isn't it? They've gone into a shell. Parents are not able to get in and pull them out. They don't know what's happening with the child. The child is either behind closed doors, or they're just really moody. There's an oscillation in their mood. They don't want to eat. They don't want to sleep. They're irritable. And of course, you have your online classes, which has led to an increase in inattention in children. Because, if you're asked to sit in front of a laptop like this, or an iPad or a phone the entire day for all your classes, apart from school. So you have your school and that curriculum, and then you have all your extracurricular activities, which are also happening online. Imagine the child's attention. As it is, children's attention is generally very time limited. And all the more when, you have a virtual classroom for everything, and you have 10 children screaming out without turns. It's difficult both from the teacher side, from the children's side. So there's so much that's going on there as well. There's a surge in impulsivity that's happening, isn't it? Children who were able to restrain their emotions, who were able to restrain their words earlier, are now not being able to restrain their emotions. There's no, there's impulsivity in all areas, right? So COVID has really done it for us. And I'm sorry, I'm giving such a very, I've started off with such a very negative connotation to the whole thing, but this is actually the truth. This is what we have been seeing as mental health professionals all through 2019. And it's sad to say that this is still continuing, and we're not really sure where it's taking us. But okay, so this is one half of it, right? So we've So this is like a bird's eye view of what children could possibly undergo, what as parents, we see children undergoing, and it's difficult, right? Children don't understand what they're undergoing. Parents don't understand what we are undergoing. It's hard for us to sort of rein in our emotions, and then we have a number of people in the house whose emotions we have to rein into as well. We're working around the clock, both men and women. We're working around the clock. We've got domestic chores which have multiplied immensely because we're all at home. We're working from home. At least most of us are, and most of us have been, right, in different fields actually. So we've got household chores to take care of. We've got our work to take care of. We've got children along with us in the same house. It's difficult. Some of us have elderly parents in the house to take care of, or somebody with a medical illness that whom we need to take care of. So it's not easy. It's difficult, right? At some point or the other, we're all going to feel stressed, which is what I think has been happening for the last 2 years plus, right? So before I move on, so I'm just, like I said, I'm just going to touch upon some of the major topics, right? And then I will open up, and then, we'll open up for Q&As, and then probably, we'll think about doing further sessions on these topics separately, because each of these topics is like an ocean, right? If I start, then I have to be talking about just depression or just anxiety or just gadget addiction, right? But Dr. Rajiv was very, he's taken so much of effort, and I think he's given out a registration form in which many of you all had come up. And the main thing that we saw was addiction, especially gadget addiction. Like I said, that seems to be top on the list in non-substance addictions. And I think it's there through the entire age group, right? From, like I said, 2, 2.5, 3. I know parents were calling in and saying they're not able to wean their children off gadgets, right? It could be the iPad, it could be the mobile phone, it could be the TV, it could be anything. The smaller, the handier, I guess. Right? So if you look at the current scenario, at least in India, you find that gadgets have sort of become like a substitute to parenting. You have calls to take. You really can't attend to your kid. You need your kid to stop screaming because you need to sit on a meeting. What do? So the easiest thing, though you may not like it, is to give the child a gadget and say, you know what, just go sit there and just watch this for 5-10 minutes. Let me come to you. So it's, which is not wrong, right? Given the current scenario, I know it's difficult and we're juggling a lot of things, so it's fine. So you can't find nannies, you're afraid to ask anybody to come home. So when you're trying to manage a lot of things, this is something that we tend to do. And of course, there's intense peer pressure, especially in the adolescent period, which is something that I think we're all very aware of. And on social media, everybody looks, sorry to say, 100 times more beautiful or more handsome than what they probably look, up front. So there are all these apps that make you look really beautiful. So there's this intense pressure for the youngsters of today to look good, to seem good, to be able to put up photos that have innumerable likes. So your life is literally in a world of fantasy where you measure your self-worth by the number of likes that you get on social media. Unfortunately, our children are falling prey to it. So you have, I can only think of 4 or 5 social media platforms, but I think there are just so many that are coming up, right? And of course, we need to understand that children and adolescents are constantly watching and emulating adults, right? So we are their role models, be it positive or be it negative. The way we cope, the way we handle things are exactly the way they would want to do it. It happens sometimes very subconsciously. It's not something that they want to do, but it's something that they pick up because you're the only adult there who's probably handling everything, right? So, so why I mentioned emulating adults is because when parents come up and tell me my child is on his mobile phone till 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. in the morning, he's gaming or she is gaming, they're on social media, and I'm so tired, I sleep off. How many times can I go up and ask my child to put off their mobile phone? What do I do? So as a parent's role, how do I kind of help them? So this is one area which parents can actually help the child with, which I would be coming to a little later, right? So what are some of the telltale signs of gadget addictions, right? So there's no interest in anything else. They don't want to socialize. There's no interpersonal skill. Like I said, they're cooped inside a room. In younger children, there's delayed speech development because the only interaction that happens again is virtually, right? There's no social interaction that actually happens for the child to pick up. So there isn't enough stimulation for the child for the language process to actually happen. And definitely there are temper tantrums, there's irritability, there's aggression, and there's a whole gamut of stuff that's happening because of gadgets, right? So what do you do? So typically if the child is younger than 2 or even younger than 3, I would say try your best to not give a gadget at all in the first place, right? And if you think, no, I can't do that, there are gadgets everywhere and I'm watching TV myself, so I need to allow my 2-year-old or my 3-year-old to watch with me, it's fine, but make sure you restrict it to a minimum of 5-10 minutes and max of half an hour, not beyond that. You sit along with the child so that you know what the child is watching, and try and expose the child to a program that is as simple and as understand, the child's, depending on the child's developmental level, not something that's too much for the child to take. Definitely not something violent, definitely not something that is got a lot of words and activities that you don't want your child to pick up, because like I said, kids' brains are like sponges, right? So please be careful about what you decide to push into the sponge. So you need to be on a constant vigil as to what it is that they are actually watching and what it is that they're doing with their gadgets, right? So young children, absolutely no gadgets separately for them. Slightly older children, I guess now having a cell phone, having a mobile phone. If you're 13, I think you sort of have one and parents are quite comfortable with that, right? So what are the complications of addiction, right? Social isolation, like I said, definitely depression, hostility, impulse control problems, psychosis. Psychosis is a huge terminology, but the other, issues like a lot of parents are seeing in children, eating disorders have come up really badly, and insomnia has really done it for kids. Children are, like I said, on their mobile phones till 3 and 4. They sleep through the day. There's no sleep-wake cycle. There's no routine. They don't bathe. They don't eat. So it's a big mess, right? So they get up 5 minutes before class, online class, or the parents have to really push and wake them up, and they're forced to sit in online class. And we know how online classes work. Teachers are teaching something, children are either chatting on the side, or children have switched off their videos and they're doing something else. And there have been so many WhatsApp forwards as a joke where grandparents and parents are sitting and doing homework and classwork and children are sleeping. So again, this online classes have also kind of taken a toll on everybody. So what do you do, right? Now that you understand that, yes, my child or somebody I know has gadget addiction, what do you do? So the first step is like how we're taught in the airlines when we fly, use the oxygen mask on yourself before you give it to a child beside you. The whole plan is to start with yourself. You set an example by curbing your excessive gadget use, right? The gadget use in your case may be something that you think is productive. It may be work related. It may be just what you do, that you need to be online all the time, which may make sense to you, but not so much to a child or an adolescent who's watching you, because all they see is you with a gadget. And so who are you to tell me when you yourself are not able to follow some sort of a rule, right? So make sure you detoxify from gadgets on an everyday basis, following which the children in the family will automatically also follow suit, right? Prioritize family time. Have some time where all the gadgets are switched off. All of you sit together, you play a game, or you sing a song, or you at least have dinner together, or you have one meal in a day together. You just talk about things that are not morbid, that are non-COVID related, in case you can do that. Don't talk about anything negative. Let it revolve around anything. It could be your old stories about your life. It could be something nice that happened during that day, something that you're thankful for, something that you're hopeful for. So any sort of positive thought or vibe that you can give your family in general would make a huge change, because we are loaded with information about what's happening around us. And unfortunately, it's all completely negative, isn't it? You pick up the newspaper, you switch on the TV, there are just information about the death toll and about how many more are infected and how the hospitals are overloaded and how people are not able to take it, etc., etc., etc. Vaccinations are not available. So we just, there's like an overload of negativity that's happening around us. So it's important for us to sort of shield ourselves from all this by minimizing our time with the television or listening to the news, right? So I know of a lot of adults who constantly update themselves with the news. So every 5 minutes, they're checking the news to see any latest updates on the COVID toll or something like that. So it's important for us also to detoxify from all this so that we have a mental space that is capable of actually helping somebody else. So if you don't have that, if you don't have the positivity within you, you can't help the person with you, be it a child or be it another adult, right? So I understand that with the current situation, an outdoor activity seems impossible, but try and reinvent some of the old games that you would play as a child, any sort of indoor game that you can also play with your child, because that would encourage the bonding process and that would encourage a sense of normalcy, which children, I think, are not able to find nowadays, right? Right. So, according to the Indian Psychiatric Society, this is again another question that's asked to me by a lot of parents. So, what is the adequate amount of screen time or the maximum amount of screen time that I could allow for my child? So, like I said, 2 years and below, preferably none. 2 to 5, max half an hour, not more than that. And like this one says, please nothing before bedtime, because that again affects your entire sleep-wake cycle. Between 5 and 18, they're very vocal, they have their own set of ideas. I wouldn't even say 5, I think we can push it. If you have a child, say about 8 to 18 maybe, 8 below, they're still, they may agree to what you say, but the kids in this generation will, I don't know, I can't vouch for them. But anyway, I guess it's important to lay down rules. It's important to stick to those rules. And like I said, you stick to them first so that they follow suit. And you can do simple things, right? So for example, positively reinforce those behaviors that you think are beneficial. So for example, if today your son or your daughter has stuck to the rule and has switched off his or own phone or TV at the stipulated period, reward him with maybe a chocolate or I don't know, maybe a sticker or a star, depending upon the age of the child. So basically you're reinforcing the positive behavior that you see in the child so that the child is reinforced to sort of has an incentive to do it the next day, right? And try and talk to the child if you think they don't want to follow rules. It's okay, give them, see, you can't expect children to change overnight, right? So let's say you have a son or daughter who's been on the television in the last 1.5 years for say 6-7 hours a day apart from their schoolwork. So suddenly minimizing it to 0 and utilization of the laptop only for school is going to be very difficult. So you can't make a drastic change in their schedule, but you can scale it down slowly and make sure you have parental controls. There's a lot of cyberbullying that's happening. There are a lot of cases I've seen of children with trauma, children with post-traumatic stress disorder, which come in mainly because of issues that are happening online. There's a lot of pornography, childhood pornography that's happening online. So please be careful when you give gadgets to children. Make sure you're constantly watching them. Do not allow them to be with the gadget in a different room where you have no, where you can't really see them, right? Right. Like I said, what do you mean by anxiety? Young children may appear more clingy, they may be more restless, they may be more fidgety, they may complain of varying aches, generally a stomach ache, a headache. They may express a lot of negativity, they may be more irritable, angry, they may have a lot of crying, they may struggle to concentrate. So if you have children who display any of these symptoms on a constant basis, then you really have to start wondering whether you're looking at something else, right? And in adolescence, apart from your anxiety, your depression, your eating disorders, you can have psychosis, you can have behavioral disorders, you can have substance abuses, and like I said, gadget addiction, which is happening. So how, as parents, can we support our children, right? The first thing to do is actually talk to them about mental health, and there is no harm. Trust me when I say this, there is absolutely no harm in talking about the mental health. The more you talk about it, the actually you reduce stigma, you make it seem like it's okay, because you make the child understand that you're probably also going through something which is very similar. So he or she is not alone. It's not something which is very weird that's happening to the child, right? Talk openly about it, and keep talking to them. This has to be on a consistent basis with any child. Nothing is going to work overnight, and nothing works unless we do it over a period of time, right? For a child to understand that, for a child to understand and make a behavior a habit, it is going to take time. And by time, I mean a month or more. So a month or more of consistent efforts from your part is required. So apart from whatever else you may have, spending time with the child, talking to the child on an everyday basis is extremely important. And when we do that as a part of a routine, when we connect to our child as a part of a routine, 90% of psychiatric issues are not seen because of great psychological support from the family, right? At in the same time, don't pressurize them to talk about their mental health. Some children take time to talk about things. Some children don't want to open up immediately, right? So give them their space, respect them for what they say. Don't go up to them and say, oh my God, you are actually thinking of such things. I mean, this is not the age you think about all this. So don't toss them away like that, saying, making statements saying you're too young to be thinking like this is not for you, we are there to worry about this, why are you worried about COVID, and who's asking you to talk about corona? No. If they have something that they feel is very, very valid, then sort of try and talk them through it to make them see what they have understood. Sometimes it's just misconceptions, stuff that they've heard from their friends when you weren't aware. So there's a lot of chatting and talking that happens in between online classes. So we don't know what children communicate to one another. So one child's fear is actually projected onto another child. And children, like I said, are very vulnerable. So they quickly pick up, especially negativity, right? And then they sort of think that they will be going through the same thing. So try and alleviate their stress and anxiety by talking through. So the take home message here is talk, allow the child to talk, give them the space, be there for them generally. And like I said, 90% of the issues just go off there itself, right? I think I've gone through all this. Try and encourage them to do innovative things like painting, come up with new games, create a routine for them so that they fall into the practice of sleeping at a particular time, waking at a particular time. Insist on meals being at the dining table and not in front of a TV again. Insist on sitting together as a family to have at least one meal a day if it's possible. Organize some play dates online, which is fine. Like I said, as long as it's monitored, and remove triggering factors, right? Right. Now, this is another area that a lot of parents have issues with because all classes are online, like I mentioned. So what is the role of a parent when it comes to online classes? I think it's important, apart from making your child stick to a routine, to understand as parents that you cannot expect the same result in an online and an offline class. See, in an online class, what most parents feel is they're very stressed because they feel like the school kind of just takes a 2-hour class and then the rest of the load is on them. They have to teach the child, they have to make sure notes are completed, they have to make sure worksheets are done, they have to make sure everything is filed and submitted. So there's a lot of stress on the parents because the child's performance is, I'm saying younger children's performance is literally dependent on the parents' involvement. And it's very hard for working parents because at the time the school is happening, the parents would be having work as well, isn't it? So you may not be able to sit through each and every class that the child has, but that shouldn't prevent you from taking some break in between where you can actually sit with the child to monitor and see how distracted the child is or whether the child is actually following what's happening in class. Because I know of a lot of children who kind of wiggle through these online classes, like I said, by telling teachers that their network isn't good, switching on their videos, chatting on the side. So there's so much that the children have actually learned to do, right? So it's important to understand that the child, it's difficult, it's different, right, for the child as well as for the teacher. I think all of us are learning to literally live our lives virtually. So yes, it's been 1.5 years, but it's still going on. So it's important for us to sort of be there to encourage and support them and see what sort of difficulties there are and try to help them through it than criticize and kind of say, oh, you're not paying attention to your online class. Your mom is saying something, you're looking elsewhere. What is this? What is that? So what happens is when that sort of on a daily basis, when that is the sort of mood that you set with the child automatically develops an aversion. And I know of a lot of school dropouts that are happening now, secondary to a lot of stress that's happening because of online classes. Please understand that the children are finding it much more difficult as compared to adults. And by the term children, I'm referring to the young adults as well, the adolescents as well, because we as social beings have to interact physically, right? And when I say we have to interact physically, it's not because we need to see somebody's face, we need to talk to somebody in person. That talking to somebody in person creates a lot of connections in the brain. So it's very biological for us. So all of a sudden, we have pulled all these children, made them sit in one room, and we're asking them to see somebody on a screen like this 24/7 for the last 1.5 years. So it's not something that the brain is wired to do. It's something that's very new. So you need to give the child that amount of space. As a parent, now you may be stepping out to work, or at least you may be visiting somewhere, going out. Children are still kept at home, especially the younger ones, for the fear of not being vaccinated. So the leeway that we get, they don't get. So please understand that they're at a very difficult stage. So don't be too harsh on them. Give them their space. Talk to them. You as a family, the child and you together will figure out something. So don't worry. That's what I'm trying to say. So in certain parts of the world, I think children have gone back to school, and now that has again caused a new set of issues, because you have the social distancing, the wearing of the masks, which itself is a huge issue for young children. Forget young children. I think even for adults, if you ask me to wear a mask for 6 hours or 4 hours in a day continuously, it's very, very hard, right? And all of a sudden you have classes that have all split. So you have in a class of 40, you have 20 coming in, you have another 20 coming in later. So they miss their friends, they can't play, there is no break. So even if they go back to school, again, it's very different from the experience that they once had, right, 2 years ago. So like I said, they're still getting used to it. In many countries, they sort of started school and schools have again closed. In India, the middle school was opened. Now again, the middle schools have closed. The primary school is not open at all, at least in most places. The senior schools have opened just for labs and just for examinations. They went in for about a month or two. Again, they've also closed. So it's difficult to sort of adapt to all this. So there are so many things that the child needs to adapt to, apart from the stress and pressure of exams as such. So give children leeway and be there for them. And like I said, they'll come around, right? So in conclusion, we have to wade through this, because this seems to be like something that's here to stay. It's not going today or tomorrow. It's going to be there for some time. There are new variants that are coming up every day, and we're not really sure where we are at the moment. So we have to cope and have to be as positive and hopeful as possible. Relaxation exercises work wonders. Meditative techniques, prayer for those who believe in a higher power definitely helps. Any sort of creative, innovative activities that you can come up with, that the child can come up with, positive reinforcement, installation of hope, going back to reading books, right? And not just Kindles, trying to learn a new hobby, which can be done at home, online learning courses that keeps your brain active so that you don't feel dull and tired. Music is a great way of relaxing. So using whatever we have to the best, to our best possible way, and making sure that we have an attitude of resilience, right? Staying positive at all times is very difficult, but building resilience within ourselves and saying we'll get through this no matter what. If that's the motto that we have as parents, and we instill the same in children, that there is hope for the future, I think together we can all go through this. Thank you so much for patient listening.
Thank you, Dr. Janani. That was so amazingly touching. And, it just relates to literally everybody over here, including me. because one way or another, we are all connected with children, and what's happening to them is actually happening to us also. And thank you very much for all the insights. I have a couple of things to say before we go into the questions, just for the benefit of all the attendees over here. One thing that came out from Dr. Janani's discussion and presentation is the fact that there is no quick fix. Okay, so it's going to take time. And any change management for that matter. In fact, even when I deal with our clients, myself, and with corporate clients or whoever it may be, change management is a long-term process. So you have to start slowly and take it little by little, and it will take time. And as rightly as she said, she said about a month's time before you can actually start seeing results. I've also heard researchers talking about a 21-day challenge, where you practice the same sequence of events, the same activities, the same discipline consistently over at least 21 days before you can actually start seeing change happening. So never give up is the biggest takeaway from the session. And reinforcing the change is not just by talking, and as she rightly said, unless we start showing them that we mean what we say, and we stick to, take the example of de-addiction from social media and the gadgets. If we are holding one mobile phone in our hand and telling the kid to put us down, how much more hypocritical can we be? And kids, they understand these things. We cannot think that they are kids anymore, because they know what exactly is going through our mind, and they play a lot of psychological games with us as well. So this is one of the key takeaways from there. And I'm really happy to say that, we have attendees not just from India in this session. We have people joining from Pakistan, from Qatar, and from Kuwait. So welcome to the session, all of you. I never had a chance to say hello to you right at the beginning. Some of you joined in a little later. We will be sending out some more, if possible, also a recording of the session so that you can listen to the bits that you have missed out. And we will share our contact details with you as well, so that you can still specifically ask us questions, stay in touch with Dr. Janani or myself, and I will be happy to route all your questions to her also. And we do have a lot of podcasts and YouTube channel activities also taking place, which will be very beneficial to the younger audiences and to the parents who are attending today also. Dr. Janani, I have received 2 questions in the chat box, if I may read them out. And by the way, to the rest of the attendees, if you have specific questions and you don't want to ask it to her directly, you can always use the chat box and I'll be happy to read it out to you. But once I finish with the questions that have come on the chat box, I'll open the session out so that in case some of you want to ask her directly and come on screen and talk, we are most welcome to do that as well. So, so the questions that I have, one of them says, you have covered about the addiction of smaller children. What about teenagers, bigger kids who are addicted to gadgets, who don't accept the restrictions and the rules for screen time that we set for them? And you also mentioned that we need to be watching and having an eye on what exactly the kids are doing with their gadgets. But when it comes to larger children, the bigger kids, teenagers and above, especially in the late teens, we might not be able to do that because they may be locked up in their own rooms. So how do we handle such a situation?
Thank you for the question. I think it's extremely valid. Yes, this is a scenario that I think many parents are facing with young teenagers who tend to, like I said, lock themselves up in a room and they've got their gadgets and we've no clue what they're doing. They do not enjoy being asked questions as a role. So yes, it is difficult for the parents, but like I said, there's no set rule on how you handle such children. It's about the rapport you've already developed with these kids. It's about the amount of trust that you have. See, for older kids, maybe putting down or laying down rules and saying 2 hours of this and, you need to give up your phone may not work, like you've rightly pointed out. But I think a very mindful discussion of why you're worried about, a lot of gadget time can really help, with the young minds, with a teenager. See, they're in a phase where both the body and mind are, they want to rebel, right? Even if they understand that something is right, It's just that's how the mind works, right? So they're in a stage where they want to kind of say, they want to be oppositional as such. They want to kind of say, no, this is me making my own decisions. I know what's best for me. You may have told me all along what is to be done, but not henceforth, right? So they are in that phase. So yes, they are a little more difficult to reach to, but it's like, how do I say this? It's like in Tamil we say soap karakkaradu, as in, you kind of keep putting water on a soap and you kind of make the soap dissolve, right? So it's a very slow process. So the first step in the process involves having discussions about a lot of other things before you address this, right? So just because you've understood that the gadget time for somebody who's 16 should not be more than 3 hours, don't jump the gun and pull the child out and kind of tell the child, look, I've heard from this that you cannot go beyond 3 hours, so you need to put your phone down. That doesn't work, right? So discussions have to ensue, and like I said earlier, everything takes time, right? So a routine that the child has had for the last 2 years or 1.5 years is not going to change overnight. So start with talking to the child about anything and everything but the gadgets. Don't attack that immediately. Start with something, have a normal conversation. Like I was telling in the talk, allow them to understand that you're there for them. You're there for anything that they may be going through, right? Sometimes you will find that with time, the child themselves come up to you and tell you that they are facing something that they need to talk about. They start confiding. Once they start doing that, once you have earned their trust, you'll find that a lot of these issues are a lot easier to handle, right? So I would say a very thoughtful, mindful discussion about things apart from gadget addiction initially, slowly moving on to a sort of allow them the space to kind of discuss the pros and cons of why you're saying what you're saying, right? Encourage questioning. If you're a parent who's comfortable doing that, I would suggest do it so that the child understands why you're saying this. Rules are sometimes, how do I say it? It's very, it's like I said, why do I have to listen to you, right? I know better than you. I've got friends. I've got the internet, which tells me I can do this, I can do that. Do you know more than Google? Is the sort of questions that youngsters come up with nowadays. So it's not about who is more knowledgeable, but it's about the child understanding that the parent is concerned about the child for a particular reason. So try this, and if you still think it isn't working, and if it's getting really out of hand and you really think you're not able to help, then maybe professional help can definitely, help you in the process. But please start with an open discussion.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Doctor. And almost connected question from another parent that just came in. They say that the children or her kids are very adamant and no more affectionate to siblings, and they are filled with negative thoughts, criticizing others, including teachers and friends. How do I handle this?
So, yeah, this is something that is on the rise. So, you're not alone, whichever parent or parents are dealing with this, which is, I guess, somewhere a little satisfying to know that you're not alone. Half the parents in the world are facing this problem, irrespective of nationality. So, so this is an area that, again, so the reason why the child may suddenly become very irritable and uncaring and fighting with siblings could be a sign of some sort of an issue that they're facing, right? It could be some bullying in class. It could be someone making fun of them. It could be a lack of self-confidence. It could be just the frustration of being cooped in the house. So if you can talk and find out if there's something that's actually troubling them, which is causing them to behave in this way, that would be really helpful. So try again. See, it's the same for a lot of things, right? So you have to, kind of make the child understand that you're being non-judgmental, you're being supportive, you're being there emotionally for them. You're not there to judge or to, put up tags or to kind of tell them, oh my God, you've come really adamant. You've become, you're not the same child that I knew a year ago. What's wrong with you? Why are you like this? Why are you making my life difficult? So try and avoid such statements and instead talk to the child about how sometimes, give them links or make links for them, give them ideas about how you yourself emote sometimes when you're upset. See, for example, you can maybe say something like, when I'm upset because of some office stress that I have, sometimes I come home and yell, right? I may not have been angry with you, but it may have been because my boss said something to me. So sometimes we tend to do that. So like that, you start a conversation with your child, talk to them to find out whether they're dealing with something else, or if it's just that they're frustrated. See, many of the teenagers would know why they're feeling like that. Some of them don't realize they're being that rude. So again, asking them, see, a lot of teenagers I see, their main complaint now is that parents don't have the time for me, or parents don't understand me, right? 99% of the young boys and girls I speak to, they seem to have this one statement that they all make, which is, parents don't get me, parents don't understand me. So they don't feel understood, which is sad, because I think parents actually do, right? It's the child's way of looking at it, because as a parent, you are taught to tell them teach them what's right and wrong. You are taught to make rules. So they sort of start looking at you in a different light, especially in the teenagers. But if you are able to show that, irrespective of whether you're there to discipline them or not, you're also somebody they can confide in, somebody who's extremely trustworthy, who would not betray their trust, who would not betray their confidentiality, then you will find 99% of the kids actually opening up, unless and otherwise you're dealing with a hardcore psychological issue, like I said, which may require professional support. See, many of the parents who are here today, if you talk to your friends, if you kind of talk to other parents, you would find that you're not alone, right? Like I said, half the parents around the world are battling this. So forming a support group amongst yourselves is helpful. I tried this technique with my son. Did you try it? Right? And when you have like a support group with other parents, not in the light of blaming your child, or not in the light of wanting to gossip about your child, or wanting to learn what the other child is actually doing and feeling happy that your child is better, not in that light, but in the sense that there is a commonality between all the children nowadays, because of whatever is happening, apart from the fact that they're going through a teenage, which in itself is difficult, it gives us that sense of, I'm there for you, you're there for me, so we can support each other. So before you dive in and try and be there for your children, make sure you are first there for yourself. I honestly feel it starts with work on ourselves, because day in and day out, our moods are never the same. We tend to grow really impatient towards the end of the day. And of course, we have enough of trying, people and incidents around us to keep provoking us. So it's very easy for us to fly off the handle. And many a times I have found that the easiest targets are actually children and young adults, right? Or basically children. And like I said, by the term children, I'm including the teenagers as well, because they are an easy target to. So if you've had a rough day in the office, you come and yell at your child. It's something that, you feel like you're giving birth to them. Sometimes you're entitled to yell at them, or maybe because they may not say anything, you feel like doing that. I'm not saying everybody's doing it, but I have seen a lot of parents who do it. So it's also about working on your mental health as you work along with your child. But the basic to any change that the basis to any change that you want to see in any person, be it a child or another adult, is actually establishing rapport and kind of making that person understand that you're there for them no matter what. If you can do that, over time, you'll find that your child comes back to you. So don't worry.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. I was thinking, when children come to me for one-on-one coaching activities, one of the things that they said is exactly what you say. My parents don't understand me anymore. And that gap seems to be coming into the family lives these days for some unknown reason. And it's important that we all understand that we are also part of that, of the trouble that we create for the children, and then take some changes within ourselves that will help them as well. I've received two questions more actually. One has come from, I'm sure she must be a therapist or a teacher. Says some parents say that his or her children eat faster and better while focusing on their screen rather than on their plate. how can we convince the parent about the consequences of this?
Oh, lovely question. I completely agree, like how there was that slide which talks about proxy parenting by the gadgets. I think, yes, I agree. It's more taxing, it's more difficult. When you pull away a gadget and you actually sit down and ask the child to eat, or you try feeding the child, right? The easier route out is to just give them a gadget, and they're just mindlessly watching whatever's moving on the screen, and then it goes in, your work is done, life is set, you have 100 other chores to look at, so you can't be sitting and wasting your time around the child's food when there's an easier way out. But I think maybe talking about the ill effects or the long-term consequences of watching something while eating, what it could actually do to the child's brain. There are n number of articles that you can look up, how there are changes that are happening, like I said, within the brain at the neuronal level, at the biochemical level, that actually starts scaring parents, that actually starts making sense to parents. See, when you just tell them, this is not a good habit. You can't be always giving the phone to the child, and the child will only eat if there's a phone, and if there's no phone, the child will not eat. So if there's no internet connectivity, you're done for the day, you're anxious. So, kind of trying to first make the parents see the link, of them taking a route which is may seem easier now, but which is like taking alcohol or taking substances, where you think initially it's helpful, and then later on you realize it has its own set of issues. Maybe getting maybe talking to them with diagrams or pictures of what sort of changes actually happen when not only kids, when we ourselves sit and watch something, or sometimes I even tell parents not allow children to read while they're eating, right? Nothing like sitting down at a dinner table or on the floor along with your family, talking about something and then eating. I know of some families who say you shouldn't talk while eating. That is also okay, but as long as you're in a group, you're mindfully doing whatever you're doing, including eating your food, right? So we run through the entire day like mindless zombies. We don't even know what we've eaten. We don't know whether we've finished a task. Sometimes I don't even know if I've brushed my teeth, but I've gone through the process because it's at a very spinal level. It's very mundane. It's day in and day out that I've been doing for years. So similarly, eating has become something like that. But to be able to train the child to mindfully do whatever the child is doing, especially having the food, it has innumerable positive effects. It's got, like I said, there are umpteen number of studies. There's so much of information on the net which talks about, giving importance to the texture, the flavor of the food that we eat, to actually mindfully focus on that and how that actually changes even the immune system in our body. So I think putting across points like this from a slightly medical point of view may reorient parents to why it's important, right?
Hey, just a last question before we wrap up, which says that one of our parents have asked, how do we deal with bullying in class? Yeah,
this is again another issue that's coming up. So there's a lot of bullying that is happening. So earlier on, it was more physical, more verbal. Now we think it's all over. It's more like cyber, where the children, they keep typing out nasty messages, or they, they get into these groups and they make fun of another child. Well, it is difficult, right? I think so. The first step is first identification that the child is being bullied. The second phase is to kind of let the child talk. So this is another thing that I wanted to tell many of the parents here. So see, we're all, as a parent, we're all evolutionarily taught to protect the young ones, right? So we're always about finding solutions to problems. We're always about trying to find quick fixes for issues. And sometimes we ourselves don't have the patience to see and wait for something to happen, right? So what happens is, after a point when a child comes to us with a particular problem, our brains are so primed to come up with a solution that we are at anxiety when we are not able to offer a particular solution. So over a point of time, children start feeling that they are not being heard enough. right? I know I'm digressing a bit from the question, pardon me, but this is a point that I wanted to mention, because this is again something that a lot of children come and tell me that my parents don't have the patience to hear me out. What I am trying to say is not what they are hearing. They're in such a hurry to find a solution to what I'm saying that they don't even let me finish, or what I am asking for sometimes is not a solution, but I just want to be heard. So if there's somebody who can actually listen to me with undivided attention, that is more than enough for me, right? So similarly, for a child who's going through bullying, right, if again assess the situation and see if this is like a recurrent phenomenon that's happening. Try and see if this child is being bullied for a particular reason. Is your child actually doing something? I'm sorry to say this, but is your child actually acting up in a way which is causing the other children to bully them? Do not take words that the child says at face value. When a child comes and tells you, I'm being bullied, what do they mean by the term bullied? Their understanding of bullying may be something completely different from what it actually means. So before we jump the gun and start feeling overprotective, it is important to because you're in an online forum at the moment, you have the luxury of actually sitting through a class and finding out what exactly is happening. What is the child referring to? Who is it that is bullying them? If this is going beyond a point, then yes, you do have to take it up with the school authorities and figure out a way to sort of very calmly get this done with, because sometimes when we become overprotective and we let our emotions run wild, we tend to make a lot of hasty decisions that can affect the child's peer relationship over a period of time, especially if the child is going to be in the same school. So these issues are very sensitive. So these need to be dealt with in a very slow manner. With respect to the child who is being bullied, it's important again to keep mentally supporting the child. They will be going through a lot of anxiety and stress. So you need to be there around for them. You need to keep supporting them. You have to tell them to first not be afraid. So there's no reason to be afraid of a bully. We all know people who actually bully are the ones who are extremely insecure, right? And the ones who get bullied are generally the passive ones. So it's important for you to teach your child to be assertive. So assertiveness doesn't mean using foul language. Assertiveness does not mean being rude, but assertiveness is actually standing up for yourself and putting across a point in a firm manner. So it's important for you to teach your child coping skills, right? Because this is the part of life where you lay the foundation for all these skills. Today, you're here to support your child. Today, you're here to protect your child. Tomorrow, you may not, I'm sorry to say. So your child needs to learn these strategies. Try and see if by teaching your child, the child is actually able to stand up for himself or herself. Try and see if the child is able to come up with a solution to the problem. Give space for the child to sort of take this into his hand, if it is something that's a little minor, and see if the child is able to wade through it. Just be there and in the background to support, right? Don't jump in and create commotion. But if this is something that is very, very serious, yes, I would say please talk to the school authorities. But what I'm trying to say here is let's not be overprotective, but let's be protective and kind of deal with the situation.
Thank you, Doctor. That is an absolutely wonderful way to explain that solution. One of the trouble that I've seen in many of the parents that I interact with also is that we are so caught up in trying to make the roads of life so smooth for our children that we fail to teach them how to travel on rough roads. And life is not filled with smooth roads. There's going to be a lot of rough roads there. So it's very important for us to help them to learn how to travel on their own. That's an absolute wonderful takeaway for the attendees today. Thank you for all the wonderful comments that you have sent so far. I will be sharing them all with Dr. Janani as well, because many of you have addressed it directly to me. Thank you very much for all the love that you have shown us today. And I'm happy to say that, we were having a chat yesterday, Dr. Janani and me, and said we may want to do a program or two which dive a little bit more deeper into some of the topics that we spoke about, including a program for your children. because, sometimes the children may open up to a total stranger than the parents at home. And I've had many of these cases when I interact with children as well. So we will be coming up with a few more programs very shortly. So please keep my email address in your safe receiver list and don't block me, because then you won't get any more of what's coming from our side. And thank you very much for your attendance today. And if any of you have any more questions, please raise your hands now. If not, we have reached 1 hour plus on the timing, and I see a few parents dropping out already. And I wish you all happiness and success in your lives. Wish you all a happy new year. Please stay safe. Please stay connected. And we look forward to being able to add more value to one another. And this suggestion that came from Dr. Janani about a support group, I would definitely put it back on to the attendees of today's program. And if there is some way that we can create a support group for you on Facebook or on any of the social media channels or in some other way, we would definitely be happy to do that also for you. Thank you very much, Dr. Janani. And very kind of you to take time out on a busy day. I know it's a busy, she's extremely busy, audiences, and to get some response from her and to get her with us for so much time is a wonderful gift for all of us this New Year. And we look forward to more sessions with her and with other participants as well. So please stay connected, and thank you very much. Good night. God bless you all.